Hey all, Ms. Z here. Today our lesson is on parallel lines cut by a transversal, but this time not only will you be determining the angle measure, but you will be solving for x. So our essential statement is I can determine angle relationships and solve for the unknown. So what we have to remember is when you have two parallel lines cut by transversal, so A and B are our parallel lines, and T is our transversal, we have a couple of angle relationships that I should mention. So we have corresponding angles, okay, which are like 2 and 6 and 1 and 5. We have alternate interior angles, so they're on opposite sides of the transversal, but on the inside of our two parallel lines, so like angles 3 and 6 and 4 and 5. And then we have alternate exterior angles, which are on opposite sides of the transversal and on the outside, like 1 and 8 and 2 and 7. And then we have same side interior angles. So they're on the inside and on the same side of the transversal. So like angles 3 and 5 and 4 and 6. So we're going to be using all of the definitions that we have learned to solve for the unknown in our example. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And here is our first example. Here we have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, and we have this angle and this angle. So we need to know what kind of angle this is first. These to me look like corresponding angles, okay? And we know that corresponding angles are what? Okay, they are congruent. So in order to solve for x, we have to set these angles equal to each other. So our example will look like 12x plus 3 is equal to 11x plus 9. Now right here, I'm going to write that these are corresponding angles. So you need to know what kind of angles they are before you can solve anything. So again, flipping back in our notes, we know that these are corresponding angles because they're on the same side of the transversal and on the same side of A and B. Okay, and here we have our equation, so we're going to go ahead and solve this equation. Go ahead and draw a line down the equal sign. That is always our first step. Now, we have a variable on both sides. So what you have to do is you have to get the variables all on one side and you have to get the numbers all on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and try to avoid negatives. So I'm going to take this 11x, and because it's positive, I'll go ahead and subtract 11x, and this goes away because that equals 0. And whatever you do to one side, you must do the same thing to the other. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 11x. Now notice how I'm subtracting 11x from the 12x. And the reason I can do that is because they are like terms. I can't subtract 11x from the 3 because the 3 is just a number, but the x is a variable. So 12 minus 11 is 1x. So that's x. Then I bring down everything I did not use. And here we have a one-step equation. So the last step is to get rid of this positive 3. The opposite of plus 3 is minus 3. This equals 0, so that goes away. Then whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So we are left with x equals 9 minus 3, which is 6. And I'm going to go ahead and circle my answer. So we know that x equals 6. Now, if I were to ask you to find the angle measure of this angle, what you would do is you would plug in 6 right here to find that measure. Let's actually go ahead and do that. Okay, so when I plug in 6, I have 11 times 6 plus 9. 11 times 6 is 66, and 66 plus 9 is 75 degrees. Now that's 75 degrees. I know, I'm sorry, this is not drawn to scale. Oops, my bad. okay? And then if I were to plug in 6 right here as well, okay, 12 times 6 plus 3, 12 times 6 is 72 plus 3 is also 75 degrees. See how they're congruent? Perfect. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, here we have another example. Two parallel lines cut by a transversal, but now we have this angle and we have this angle. So we have to determine what kind of angles these are. Looking at this, they're on opposite sides of the transversal on the inside of our parallel lines, making these alternate interior angles. And we know that alternate interior angles are also congruent. Yes, that's right. So the way we set up this problem is we make these two angles equal to each other. So we take 27x minus 1 is equal to 25x plus 5. And then we go ahead and solve for x. So I'm going to draw my line down the equal sign. Remember, your goal here is to get the variable by itself. So let's go ahead and move the variables to one side and all the numbers to the other. I'm going to go ahead and work with this 25x first. It's a positive. So to get rid of it, I have to minus 25x. This goes away because that equals 0. But whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. And I line up like terms. Again, if you notice in this example, 27 minus 25 is 2x, and then I bring down everything I did not use. Now this looks like a two-step equation, so we follow those steps. Find the side with the variable, find the number not attached to the variable, and perform the opposite operation. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. 5 plus 1 is 6. Okay, and then I bring down what I did not use, 2x equals 6, and my last step is usually always to divide in a two-step equation. But again, whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other, and 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So I'm going to go ahead and actually write the answer right here. X equals 3. All right. Again, if you wanted to know what the angle measure was, you would just plug in 3 into there to see if that works. To save time, I will not be doing that, but you can double check my work if you wanted to. All right, and here we have our last example. Okay, two parallel lines cut by a transversal. Now we have these two angles, this one and this one. This is interesting because these two angles are on the same side of the transversal, but they're also in between lines A and B. So these are same side interior angles. And same side interior angles, if you look at your definitions, these actually, they're not congruent. These two angles, when added up together, equal 180 degrees. So setting up this equation is slightly different because I know this angle, 12x, okay, added up with this angle, 23x plus 5, is equal to 180 degrees. Okay, so now, again, just slightly different. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line down the equal sign. And then what I have to do, because I have two variables, I have to combine like terms before I can do anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and circle my like terms. I have two x's and then have just a number. Okay, so 12x plus 23x is 35x. And then we just have one number, so plus 5 equals 180. And now again, this is just a two-step equation. You follow the steps for a two-step equation. Draw a line down the equal sign. Find the side with the variable. Find the number not attached to the variable and perform the opposite operation. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. 180 minus 5 is 175. Is equal to what I did not use, 35x. The last step in a two-step equation is usually to divide. by 35. When I divide 175 by 35, you can feel free to use a calculator. That actually equals 5. So we have x equals 5. And that's it. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.